Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
As Bruce indicated, I'm Dennis Shaw. He gave me my titles. I don't often use those, but I do have a doctorate of ministry from Wesley Theological Seminary. So, and I'm a retired elder in the Mountain Sky Conference, and I also serve as the statistician for the conference. I want to talk about the general and jurisdictional apportionment, and that is what is used to support the conference, the connection beyond the conference. And so you can see here that it's composed of 8 funds. You'll often hear, you might see me occasionally abbreviate it once I've used it the first time, of G and J, general and jurisdictional. There are 7 general funds. Those are the first 7 that are shown there in red. And then there's 1 jurisdictional fund. And that one is used to support the jurisdiction. And so those 7 funds are how we support the connectional church. Now your question might be, how large are those expectations on the Mountain Sky Conference? And I show you here the comparison between 2020 and 2021. Traditionally, about half of the expectation of what we will share with the larger church, the general church, is in the World Service Fund. That one actually technically in the bullet, in the Book of Discipline, indicates that it is the first priority for apportionment payment. We also have the Ministerial Education Fund, which is used to support seminaries, and we get to keep a portion of that ourselves to support our own ordination process. The Black College Fund, which is used to support the historically black colleges. There's about 12 of them. And there was an article on that last week in the news. Africa University is in Africa, and it is supported by the general apportionment funds. The Episcopal Fund is used to support bishops around the world, and it costs about $350,000 a year per bishop and their staff and their retirement. So we're actually being billed at a little less than what it costs us to actually have Bishop Karen. There are other conferences, obviously, that pay more than those numbers that are there, and the delta, the difference between what it is that they're asked to pay and what it is for their own bishop is used to support the rest of the bishops and the rest of the world. General administration is used to support, for example, the General Council on Finance and Administration. Discipling Ministries is supported by that. WestPath, which used to be known as the Board of Pension and Health Benefits, is entirely supported by its own mechanism of charging a fee for its service. It's a fee for service kind of thing. So that particular formerly a board, general board, has now been renamed, and it no longer needs any apportionment dollars to support it. Interdenominational cooperation, you'll notice that it drops quite a bit in 2021. Frankly, this is one that I'm a little surprised they didn't move it into general administration because it has, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, underspent its allocation, and so it has substantial reserves. And so you can see that substantial reserve being shown in the quite a bit of difference between the 2 apportionments. Then you have the Western jurisdiction. I expect our 2021 Western jurisdiction to go down a little bit. It's generally a function of the World Service Fund. And because the World Service Fund went down, I would expect that when we're told what the number is, it would go down. The number 6, almost 1.7 million for 2021 we're using the lower number, making some assumptions about what will happen at General Conference 2021, rather than bill you at a high rate for 2021 and then have to give you a refund or something like that. We're making some assumptions about what will be approved at General Conference 2021, and we're billing at the lower rate. This is not officially approved by General Conference, but I think anybody that's paying attention to this would be quite surprised if somebody at General Conference wanted to approve a much higher number. And we put a little bit of pad in there so we can deal with it if there is a slight increase. Prior to 2020, these funds were probably not widely known to the average person in either the legacy Rocky or the legacy Yellowstone conferences. They were placed dollar for dollar in those budgets. Again, I used the word discipline a few minutes ago. By discipline, they will be accounted for dollar. You cannot under allocate these in the system that is used, and we were accounting for 100% of it, and Yellowstone was as well, and placing it into our budget. For Legacy Rocky Mountain, that consisted of right at a third of our budget, like 32.7%, something like that. And if you added the two together, those were about $2 million. It wasn't quite a third for Legacy Yellowstone, because Yellowstone had a little bit different apportionment system, and so it was more like about a quarter of theirs. But that having been said, it was still a substantial portion of it. And it's allocated to the individual conference based upon what they spend. And it's not all spending. It's only what you spend to support the church by clergy and laity. It's to support the operations of the church and the programs of the church. For 2020, that accounts for about $335 per $10,000 in the expenses in those three categories: staff, clergy and lay, operations and programs. And in 2021, that will drop to about $300 per $10,000 spent in 2021. Now, I want you to keep a thought in your mind, is the fact that what is spent for apportionments, and we don't have a district apportionment, but if we did, that would be accounted in this same way. But the mission share, that does not count, it does not bump up your general or jurisdictional apportionment. The money you send in for special Sundays does not bump up your general or jurisdictional apportionment. That money which you spend locally and send to a local ministry. I retired out of Salt Lake. We supported a Crossroads ministry in downtown Salt Lake. We gave them $4,000 or $5,000 a year out of our budget from Hilltop. We supported them. And so that money would not count towards this $300 per $10,000. In addition, those things that are capital expenses that are shown in the capital expense array, or that which is used to reduce the debt on the building. Where I was appointed, Hilltop United Methodist in Sandy, Utah, we had debt retirement responsibilities. We owed about $450,000 on the building. So as we paid that down, that does not drive up our apportionment for the general and jurisdictional. It is only calculated based upon what you spend for staff, what you spend for operations, and what you spend for programs. We made a decision in 2019 at Billings to separate the general and jurisdictional funds from our budget. The overarching rationale was that primarily as a result of General Conference 2019, we were presented with a number of mutually exclusive choices. Over and over again, we kept hearing, both on the more progressive side as well as the more traditional side, viewpoints that people wanted to be more in control, they wanted to tell the conference how the money should be distributed for the general and jurisdictional apportionment. And as you listen to it, it was by and large mutually exclusive. You could not do both things for both groups of people at the same time. That petition passed by about 91%. I don't know the subtlety of the exact title of what they call the group we were in. We used to call them legislative committees. I think they call these listening sessions or something. It's got a title like that, but it's a committee which meets as a committee of a minus. It's a subdivision of the entire annual conference, and we met there. There were many things wrong with how that was done. I concede the fact that we had two pretty major petitions in the group, and we had 1 hour total to talk about both major petitions. I mean, the other petition that was in the room when we were talking was the removal, the closing down of the United Methodist Church, and we limited debate to one speech for, one speech against. And somebody turned around and said, "Don't you think a conversation to eliminate the United Methodist Church warrants more than one speech for and one speech against?" We had probably the same situation here, where we probably should have talked about this longer than we were able to talk about it based upon the rules that were there. There was a gesture to try to move it to the floor for floor debate, and that did not pass. At the virtual annual conference for 2020, there was an initiative to bring the general and jurisdictional funding back into the budget for 2021. That did not pass. And there was also an amendment that was presented on the 2021 Black College Fund, which did pass, and we are mandated for 2021 to pay that at 100%. Now, the question that I think gives me some pause is, how are we doing? And we're 58.3% of the year, through the year, at the end of July, and we only have collected about 11.4% of the funds that are necessary to pay at 100%. We paid last year at 80%. We paid last year at 80%. I'm not sure any of us thought we would pay at 100% when we went to this. I concede that I never thought we would be at 20% expectation. The churches have made their choices as to where they want the funds to go, and you can see here that the Western jurisdiction is where people have chosen the most. Black College is second. Africa University is third. Much to my personal surprise, the Ministerial Education Fund is last, and we actually get a rebate from this. I think it's 25% is what we get back from this. So for every dollar that is theoretically paid for this, we actually get 25 cents back for us to use internally. So that's really, we need to take a long, hard look at that one. And that will be one of the ones we have an article about trying to help us out. How we will recognize churches for what they have done here, we're going to have a platinum award, and we're calling those platinum ministry partners. But those are the churches that will have paid 100% for both mission shares. That's the support of the Mountain Sky Conference, and the general and jurisdictional apportionment, the number that's actually allocated to them. The gold would be for those who paid 100% of their mission shares, and silver for those who paid 100% of their general jurisdictional. This comes in from Ezra, the year-end statistics tool. Part of the reason I was asked to manage this for the Council of Finance Administration is because I am the conference statistician. So this is so highly tied up in what's going on with the stats that asking me to do it was getting the person who had the most experience dealing with this to look at this. We would be open to a conversation on a request basis. If a church wanted to say, I still don't want to pay my mission shares, but I'd like to be a 100% church. If I paid my mission shares and sent it all to the general jurisdictional, would you count that? Don't do that on your own without having a conversation with us, but we're open to that conversation potentially occurring, because there are churches out there, of the churches that we expect to be part of the Wesleyan Covenant Association. Many of them are not paying anything on their mission shares to support the annual conference. There are several that are paying 100%, but the norm is paying nothing. The median in that set is nothing. So if they wanted, for example, pay to support the churches in Africa, that could be accomplished, and we would be glad to do that. Important for us in our brains to get the idea of the fact that the years that we're dealing with here for the general jurisdictional versus the mission share for the conference is not the same thing. We must pay the general and jurisdictional apportionment in early January. So that year ends on December the 31st. Somebody running into the room and paying us $1,000 for the general jurisdictional fund on 31 January, excuse me, would not be particularly helpful for 2020. We would be glad to apply to 2021, but it would not be particularly helpful for us meeting our obligation for 2020. We must pay that in early January. As an aside, I do pay attention to what the other conferences do. I live part of the year in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is part of the Holston Conference, and the Holston Conference pays very little of its general jurisdictional apportionment through the course of the year, and then comes in and pays about 80 to 90% of it in December and January. They go from almost zero to almost 100% in about 2 payments. We might end up doing something similar as that. The mission share year, that's the 10% income-based apportionment that goes to support the annual conference. That year ends on January the 31st. So the mission share year is 1 February to January 31. The general and jurisdictional apportionment year is 1 January to 31 December. For 2020, you can see what the breakout is for your individual church by getting on, and I've used the word ministry financial. Is that the right term, Angela? Ministry financial? She's nodding her head. That's the mechanism that's used to pay your pastor's health, retirement, the mission shares, and it's also used to collect the apportionment for general and jurisdictional. It's broken out there by the 8 funds or the general pool. The pool means you don't want to allocate it. You're okay with letting someone else do that allocation, and we will say thank you very much, and we will accept that. Last year, when we only paid 80% of the overall apportionment, general jurisdictional, we paid Methodist Education Fund, Western Jurisdiction, Black College, and Africa University at 100%. Those were all supported at 100%. For those of you that did well in high school algebra, you know that that means then, therefore, that we supported others at less than 80%, which is exactly true. That's exactly what happened. If you want to know, people sometimes, I've made a few changes to 2020 as recently as about 3 weeks ago. I did send out a copy of what the proposal was for 2020 in June of 2019, and again later in the summer, more like August of 2019. I got no corrections, and then some churches have now come in and said, whoa, 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 there's a big mistake in here. We've made some mistakes. And we have gone back in and made changes for 3 churches, not insignificant, but we did do that. Would we do that some more for some more? Of course we would. If people can demonstrate to us that something has happened internally, the biggest thing that happened internally is that churches were reporting dollars twice. They were showing, for example, the apportionment that was paid to the Mountain Sky Conference. It's calculated and placed into Ezra by us, by me, but they were showing it as a cost of operations, and so the dollar was being counted 2 times. Part of the nature of the way Ezra ought to work is a dollar should only be counted for 1 time in 1 place. Then for 2021, the annual conference material for the Mountain Sky Conference is where that report is, and I have created a small URL, a tiny URL, if you will, that you can then see that without having to type in mountainskyumc.org/2020 annual conference / all those various backslashes that would have to be there. And again, the question is, will you edit that? The answer is, of course I will, but I need to get it done quickly. Technically, I'm late getting the statistics turned in to Nashville, but I'm okay with them. They're okay with me. I'm okay with them. They realize this is an unusual year, and but I would like to get those turned in and up to date quickly. So if you think there's a need for you to edit that, please get on it quickly. I sent out a note in early June telling people what I was about to do, and I've had multiple churches take me up on the offer to make those changes. Now, one of the important things for us to remember in this, and this has been surprising to a number of churches, they sit down and say, this is greater than 3%. What you're asking us to pay is more than 3% of our apportionment. We went from 13% to 10 plus a direct billing. And the direct billing for most churches will be in the 3% range. That's where it will be $30 per $1,000, $300 per $10,000. But there are churches out there, a number of churches out there, that their income is hypothetically, let's say, $100,000 a year from their congregation, and they're spending $200,000 a year because they've got $100,000 of prior year investments that are coming back and supporting them. Those churches are going to have a higher fair share than the churches that are not doing that. So that's got to keep that in mind, that that's indeed a possibility, that it would not be a clean 3% of what your historical income was from the congregation. One of the things that I would recommend that churches consider doing is to take the articles that we are writing on to the Tuesday e-news. We've already written one article on the Episcopal Fund. We've already written an article on the Black College Fund, the Black College Fund. And both of those contain links back to the General Council on Finance Administration, which you could use to create a local handout, a local PDF, if you will, that you could email out and give people the option of making a special extra mile giving. Those articles are appearing now on most of these funds. Well, I think we're going to end up writing an article about 6 of the 8 funds. For 2021, we're going to make out a suggested schedule. We're going to have, for example, Black College Fund would be recommended to be collected in potentially February. Why? That's Black History Month. And the Black College Fund is one of the oldest funds that we have, having been created in the 1870s and then more formalized in 1939 when the Methodist Church came together from this various parts. So that's my completed portion of it. And I noticed it took me right at 25 minutes to do that. What are your questions? And I would prefer, I'm going to give the control of the screen here back to Angela and to Bruce. But what are your questions? And I would hope, I see there's like 8 questions in the chat in the observation here. So let me start over there with that, if that's okay. I noticed that Kathy Snodgrass asked, why is it dropping in 2021? Kathy, that's an excellent question. And the reason it's dropping in 2021 is that what the big church is going to plan to spend in 2021 through 2024 is about 30% less than they plan to spend for 2017 through 2020. So there's been a substantial reduction. This is independent of the changes that may occur at General Conference 2021. These were planned reductions based upon the United Methodist Church actually getting smaller, and they've made the staffs smaller. They've changed locations. A good example was the General Board for Global Ministries had a large presence in New York City at a building commonly called the God Box. There's about 50 or 60 interdenominational activities that went on at this next to Riverside Church. And they moved that office from New York City with that associated rents for New York City and compensation levels for New York City, and they moved it to Atlanta. And they cut the salaries substantially because the cost of living and the compensation required to get excellent people in Atlanta is less than it would be in New York City. And you see that story repeated. You also see staffs, the statistical staff at the GCFA went from approximately 7 people to about 4. The experience level of the people went from people that had 5 and 10 years of experience dealing with the year-end statistics to people that had just graduated from the University of Texas in information technology. Good people, but they cost a lot less than the people that were let go. So they've cut the budget both upon expected changes that would occur, and so we are a benefactor of that. Let's see. Okay, I'm not sure I see any other particular questions. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to either put your hand up and wave your hand around and Bruce will recognize you, or send it over there to the group chat. So thank you very much. Dan, how did I do? Okay. Dan used to be the treasurer for the conference, and are you retired, Dan, out of the West Path? Okay. All right. Bruce?
I see the apportionment fund pool. What is the apportionment fund pool? What we're talking about there is, and Dennis can go into more detail, but we have a category that people can pay into if they choose not to put their payment into one of the 8 categories, the 7 specific funds in the Western jurisdiction. They can say as a church, we would rather have the Conference on Finance Administration to make the decision to where the money goes. And so they can put it into this 9th category and just say, put it where you think best.
Well, like last year, we received about 75% of what we asked for. We paid 80% of what the general church asked us. How did we pay 80% and pay Methodist Education Fund, Black College Fund, Africa University, and Western Jurisdiction 100%? By prioritizing them as a value and underpaying some others. That's how we did it.
Next question is Deb Wacker is asking, can you go over the investment information and how it affects our mission shares? Many churches have endowments, and those endowment funds can be used for, in some cases, capital investment, which is then excluded from mission shares, or when it's brought, as the investment grows, there's no mission shares on the earnings, but when those earnings are brought into the church and spent for general operating purposes, then mission shares is charged against that amount. It's just like fundraising for an endowment or something like that. That when you raise the money, it's not counted, but when it is spent, then it is counted. Let's see the next question.
Penelope Olson asked the question, can I allocate what I have put into the apportioned fund pool to individual ones? The answer is yes, you can. Work with Angela, but That'd be the suggestion. But I believe you have the capacity to make those changes as you log on to the system. But work with Angela. Send Angela a note. Tell her that's what you want to do. If you want to not have you want to have zero in the pool and you want to reallocate it all to a particular targeted fund, please be our guest. That's exactly why we designed it the way we designed it.
Rob Pickett is asking, he wants to know more about the G&J apportionment funds. Is the best way to learn the articles that'll be published, or are there other sources? I would say the articles are the best, because the people that are writing those articles, for example, I'm writing an article now about Africa University in Zimbabwe, are drawing from a number of sources. Where you can get information about this is going to the General Conference website, but then you have to go to each of the various areas and dig it out. And that's a little difficult in some of them. So I would suggest, and Dennis, do you agree?
No, I totally agree. Our strategy, Rob, is that the Cliff's Notes version, the one-page summary of what you need to know, are our articles. For those that are terminally curious and want to know more than that, there is information at the General Conference level, and we link to those in our articles. We link back to those. But I know, for example, I want to say the World Service Fund, the link back is to like 65 pages of material. So we're trying to do the best we can to give you the Cliff's Notes version. But if you want to know more, there is definitely data out there to satisfy your curiosity.
As an example, coming up in the Africa University, it actually, and it's not on the website for the General Conference, but it is a partner of Iliff University, and 15 LGBTQ students from Iliff went to Africa University in 2015. So I will be including some of their observations and so forth from Africa University. And secondly, the late Dr. Clarence Snelling, from a member of Park Hill, who was a professor at Iliff, was one of the founders of Africa University, and then one of the founders of the seminary in Moscow. So he was a wealth of knowledge for me. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, or I would have had him write the article. But those are the kinds of things that you can get from the articles that we're putting in that are not necessarily easy to get to on the General Conference.
And since Bruce brought it up, I'm a graduate of Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. And Wesley was one of the schools that had a vital part in getting the seminary started in Moscow. They have by and large stepped back from that investment. And it has to do with the theology that seems to be emerging out of Russia as it relates to what is going on. So they have stepped back and said our engagement here with a body that is so gosh, what's the right word to use? But it's very conservative, extremely traditional, and they've decided that they just cannot invest in that anymore and step back from that, which I think is what goes on with the local church, which is why some churches are willing to support. A good example, I don't think Grand Junction First minds me telling you this. They're 100% paid on the general jurisdictional, and they've allocated it equally between the Episcopal Fund and the Western Jurisdictional Fund. That's how they've done it. And I would encourage every church out there to do the same kind of thing. Find a way, what are your values, what it is you think is important, and go support those.
Dennis, I'm sure people at Wesleyan Theological Seminary would tell you this, but for a period of time, Clarence was the only professor when the seminary started and he taught all the classes. Yeah. When they first started. It was fascinating stories.
Kim, Kim James asked a question about will all the articles be found in one place at the website? I'm going to give you a guarded yes. And I say that because they are doing some of that right now. They have already made substantial changes in the way the website is constructed. And so there is a page that is nothing but responsible stewardship articles. But as we write more and more and more of these, I think we need to start to move to responsible stewardship hyphen general jurisdictional, responsible stewardship hyphen pension and health benefits, responsible stewardship hyphen trustees. And that's going to be a recommendation I'm going to work through Angela back to the communications people, but they've been very responsive.
Mhm.
They've been extremely responsive on these kind of suggested changes. At the risk of bragging a little bit, I honestly believe that responsible stewardship overall is doing a superb job sharing what the facts are and how it is that people understand what they need to know in order to be treasurers and finance chairs at local churches. And I think we're doing a good job with that. And I want to compliment Bruce and Angela for the work they're doing in that area. But that was a good question, Kim.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Kim, as a matter of fact, I looked at it this morning, and I think all of the articles to date are on there, and the past webinars that we had, their recordings are, I think most of them are on there now. So our past webinars that we had, we used to have quarterly webinars, and we're starting now. August is our first monthly webinar. We would not have had one until October, but the copies are on that one site for responsible stewardship.
And Kim made a comment, I would hope the missions committee folks be linked to me at the local church level. Is that what you meant, Kim? Okay. That I think is an area that you're in control of. We're not as much. But we are using the Tuesday News as our point of advocacy and departure, but then once it's on the Tuesday News, we then target that out to a more directed group of people. So we both want to share generalized information to those that are not necessarily on church finance committees, but that read the Tuesday News. But we also want the information to go to those who are on church finance committees as well.
For those of you that may not be aware, responsible stewardship is made up of the Council on Finance Administration, the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Pensions and Health Benefits. And so what our responsibility is to coordinate those three main entities, administrative entities of the conference, and work together so that we are better coordinated and at least know what each other is doing. And Kim has been doing a very, very good job coordinating as a member of the responsible stewardship, and now as chair. We're very proud of her. And I have recently been working with J.R. Kasner from trustees, so I think you're going to see even more coordination between the three bodies so that we try to speak with one voice. And if we're inconsistency is difficult to deal with. We hope that we can be right and consistent, but at least we'll be consistent.
I think you have good people serving the conference on those three groups. I really do. I think I'm biased on the Council on Finance Administration, but the Board of Pension and Health Benefits and the trustees are superb, just very, very solid people. And they keep the local church very at the forefront of their mind.
Yeah, and I think we all hold the philosophy that the conference is there to serve the churches. The churches are not there to serve the conference.
Amen.
And we try to reinforce that as often as we can. So if you find that your answers are not being satisfactorily responded to, your questions, you can certainly get a hold of Kim or myself or JR or Angela. Angela has been doing a wonderful job of responding and being a very, very cooperative face of the conference from the administrative side.
If we don't have any other questions, I do want to come back to what we did in 2019, which was we supported Black College, Africa University, Ministerial Education Fund, and Western Jurisdiction at 100%. I don't know where we're going to be in January. I just don't know. But let me assure everyone here that the values within the Council on Finance Administration with different people has not changed radically over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Okay, those 4 funds were extremely important to us in January of 2020. I would expect those 4 funds to be very important to us in January of 2021. We will do everything in our power to support those as close to 100%, if not at 100% as we can. The resources that are placed into the general pool gives us the capacity to do that. If you think that you have a different priority and you don't think those 4 funds should receive that kind of support, then I would urge you to look at the funds that do hold values at your local church, and then support those funds by directly controlling your apportionment payment to those funds. But I would say to you that we will continue to value Ministerial Education Fund, Black College Fund, Africa University, and the Western Jurisdiction highly, and we will do everything in our power to maximize what it is that goes in there. And that's Dennis Shaw talking as one person of 12, but nonetheless, I tend to think that that would be a value that we would hold. So I think what we've done here is, with the change to the system, we're going through some growing pains. You combine that with COVID-19, so you have reduced income level at the local church. We're down approximately 7% at the local church from 2019, and 2019 was not a stellar year because of General Conference 2019. So we're mindful of the fact that there are a lot of factors that are going on out there. I personally am quite impressed with what it is that the local churches are doing to support the Mountain Sky Conference through the mission shares. It's very, very impressive, extremely impressive. We've been able to, we're paying attention closely. We're hyper vigilant on what is going on there. We have reduced some spending, but I can just assure you that we are quite gratified with how it is that the local churches are responding. 270 of the 370 churches have stood tall and are there. I think it's disappointing that about 100-ish have paid nothing on the mission shares, but we don't know what their stories are. It's very possible that those churches, hear my dog shaking her head, nonetheless, it's very possible that there's the survival element is going on at the local church for a substantial number of those 100. So I just want to say thank you very much for the good work that's gone on. I didn't mean to be as long-winded there, Bruce, as I ended up being.
No, that's fine, Dennis. I always anticipate that.
Always anticipate me being long-winded?
Yeah. Angela, do you happen to have the list of future topics right in front of you? I don't.
I don't, but I know that they're trying to get those up on the website.
Okay.
And if you've registered with your email address for today, then I'll make sure that I email you with that full list for quick reference. And then I'll provide the link back to wherever the home is on the conference website. I'm not sure how close they are to getting those updated, but I'll be happy to email that. I wanted to add one comment, just circling back to the general and jurisdictional apportionments and the fund pool versus the specific 8 funds. If you as a church do direct your gift to a specific fund, we will honor that. So we're not going to override what you've asked us to do with directed funds. I get that question fairly frequently. So if you put it in the apportion pool, then it's fair game for CFNA to then apply where it is needed within the general and jurisdictional monies. But if you do direct it to 1 or 2 or 6 or 8 funds by specific amount, that's where we apply it and that's how we use it. So, don't let your church members or your leadership question whether the money is being used as it has been intended. And I just want to verify that. Again, if you put it in the apportioned pool, then we'll apply it where it's needed based on our conference priorities with respect to the general and jurisdictional support. So just to clarify that.
Thank
Anything
you,
else I've forgotten?
I just want to amplify on that. And what that means is if, for example, the Black College Fund is directed more funding than what our apportionment is, we will still honor that and pay more than what the conference apportionment was. So that under no circumstances will we redirect any of the church's request. Anything else for the good of the order? Anybody?
And I apologize. It was 5 funds we supported 100%. The other one was the Episcopal Fund. I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't know how I spaced on that one. Forgive me.
Yeah, that's the one that has the most direct impact on supporting our bishop. I do not see any hands waving. And for those of you who have chosen just to put your name and not your picture, that's hard to see a hand waving. But I assume you use the chat box. I want you to know that we have a wonderful golf team of couch golfers for the Center for Health and Hope's virtual golf tournament tomorrow from 4 to 5:30. The Mountain Sky All-Stars, consisting of myself, Angela, Bishop Karen, and Rob Ridenour, are the conference All-Stars, and we'll be competing in the couch section of the golf tournament tomorrow. And as I predicted, our virtual golf tournament is going to raise more money than our regular golf tournament ever raised in the last 15 years. So it's fun. We're having a good time. So if you find yourself wanting to check that out, look at the Center for Health and Hope's website. That's my commercial for the day. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. You're a wonderful group. We appreciate all that you do in support of the mission of this church. We love you all, and we wish you the best. Do me a favor and please stay safe. Good morning. Still morning. Good morning, everyone. Bye now.